to the Without the Bank podcast, where you and I are going to talk about all things IBC, the business of banking, utilizing money correctly, and how this will help you grow your business and your wealth. All right, folks, we are going to get right into it. And we are going into another Becoming Your Own Banker study of Nelson's book. This time we are on the chapter, How the Infinite Banking Concept Got Started. And I think a lot of people skip this chapter. I actually find this chapter quite interesting, but a lot of people skip it and they have questions that are answered in this chapter. So I think that I'm going to point out a few things I maybe have not pointed out previously if you are a listener to my other podcast. So this is still going to be a good one to listen to. If you guys that are listening have not gotten Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, you can do that by going to withoutthebank.com. And you can grab Life Without the Bank and Becoming Your Own Banker at the same time. Why is that important? Because Nelson writes in a way that makes you think. And I personally don't mind thinking. But if I don't know what to think about, how am I supposed to think about it? That's kind of how my brain works. That's not how everybody's brain works, but that's mine. And so I like to kind of be given a little more information. And Life Without the Bank, I make it a little bit simpler, and then people find it easier to read Nelson's book. But he is the founder of the concept. This is my financial Bible, I call it. And so if you are really wanting to learn the infinite banking concept, you need to do that by reading Nelson Nash's book. And I always find it very funny when agents will be like, "Oh, Mary Jo, I read your book. I want to do this." Well, have you read Nelson's book? Who's Nelson? For the love of Pete. If you've read my book and you don't know who Nelson is, you didn't read my book. You might want to go back and reread it again, and then you might want to look at what the infinite banking concept is. I don't just put that in there to put that in there for no reason. It's all there, which is why we are doing a book study. Okay, how the infinite banking concept got started. Nelson was a forester. Why is that important? Because when you plant a tree, it's probably 30 years later that you get to harvest that tree, that you get to see that tree full grown, right? If you want that tree to be full grown tomorrow, it's not going to happen. The whole point of him telling us he's a forester is because he had long-term thinking. When we look at the infinite banking concept, it is a long-term thought process. For me and my clients, it may go generational, meaning 3 generations. You might come into a meeting with me and I might be talking about something for your grandkids. That takes people by surprise. And they did not expect to have that conversation. But what we do today affects us generationally. So if we have a policy, so many people want to get rich tomorrow. And it's funny when people say, "Oh, this is just a get rich quick scheme." A get rich quick? How about get wealthy slow? Because it takes 10, 20, 30 years, 10 years typically to where we're going to break even. 30 years, 20 years typically to where we really see the effects of everything going on. If you want short term, yeah, fine, go trade the markets if that's your thing. If there is get rich quick, this is not it. You have to think like a forester. And then it tells us in this chapter as well that he got caught in the real estate game. And he says here, and I think this is funny, as long as things go the way the financial geniuses describe it, it's all great. But they never tell you what happens when the lever goes the other way. Isn't that the truth? Look at me. I made you a 25% rate of return. Look at me. You made a 7% rate of return, a 12% rate of return. But let's not talk about what happens when the lever goes the other way. Let's just pretend like that didn't happen. Oh, but it did. It happened and it affected you long term. Because as a 401k, as an IRA, as the noise of the traditional world, what do they tell us? They tell us, oh, just look at your rate of return. What did I make last year? And then if it wasn't good last year, then let's average it out over the last 5 or 10 years. But how about long term? If I'm in my 30s, 10 years is not long enough. I've got another 60. I need to be thinking long term. And if the market dropped, how did that affect me long term, 60 years down the road, not next year, 5 years, 6 years, 60 years? Most of us don't think like that. So the real estate market was fabulous in the 80s, right? Going gangbusters. Should say 77 because that's the year Nelson references here. So going gangbusters. He's buying real estate and he says there was no logical reason not to expand. So I did. The interest rate at that time was 8% prime, but you must pay 1.5 over prime because basically nobody gets prime. Bankers are not lending you money because you have real estate. They are doing it because they think you can make payments. This chapter gives us an insight to what Nelson was going through, which is what we're going to all go through at some point in our life. The bank is going to lend us money because they feel we can make payments on a business purchase, on a land purchase, on real estate purchases. Heck, they're going to lend you money because they feel you can make payments on the car. And you're going to buy the car because you think that you can make that payment. You're not going to look at how much money you're paying. You're going to look at, can I make the payment? He said, why else would they require personal endorsement on the loan? Right? Because they think you're going to make the payment. Then 1981 and 1982 happened and the prime rate rose and peaked at 21.5%. Plus your 1.5%. On top of that, and he was paying 23% interest on $500,000 of debt. 23%. He went from 9.5% to 23% because he was playing the short-term game of buying and selling, and he got caught. And now what do I do? This is where the infinite banking concept started. He got caught and said, I had no idea what to do. He then, to make the story a little shorter, his house was robbed while he and his wife were away, and his granddaughter was diagnosed with cancer. And he says, when a lot of consecutive bad things happen to you, when a lot of bad things happen to you in consecutive order, what do? You start praying. And while he was praying and on his knees, he says it was like a baseball bat across the eyes. He had money he could get at 5 to 8% from the different life insurance companies through policies that he already owned. So this is an answer to the question that most people have when they read the book. Well, what if interest rates go up? Will the life insurance company charge me more interest? When interest rates were 23%, Nelson was borrowing at 5 to 8%. If interest rates go up, do you think the insurance company is going to raise rates if they did not in the 80s? They take your dollars and they invest that in bonds and real estate as the majority of their portfolio. Bonds right now are not paying well. And they have to guarantee that you have a policy for 120 years. So what are they going to do? They are going to then go buy bonds. If interest rates go up, they will make a better rate of return, which in fact means they don't need to increase your interest rates. If Nelson wasn't paying more than 5 to 8% in the 80s, I would not anticipate having to pay more than 5 to 8% now if interest rates went up. Because what? Insurance companies look long term. Here is something that Nelson does not disclose in his book, but he talks about it in his seminars, that he had $500,000 of debt, but then he had a business partner that was going to either file bankruptcy or had to sell. So Nelson inherited his $300,000 of debt. So he was actually paying $800,000 of debt off at 23% interest. He also does not say in the book, but he had that all paid off. I believe his number was 13 or 15 years. He had what he calls the snakes and dragons paid off. And that may actually be in here somewhere. I've listened to a lot of Nelson seminars and read the book a lot, so I don't remember where it's at. But he had the snakes and dragons paid off because he figured out what? If I can borrow from 5 and 8%, how can I possibly get more money into these policies as fast as I can so I can turn around, borrow against it, and pay off the snakes and dragons? So he quickly moved money into life insurance, borrowed against it, paid off the bank. Then what? He owed himself that money, but he could pay that back whenever he wanted. But it was not going to be at 23% interest. He was also a life insurance salesman for 30 years. So he understood dividend-paying life insurance and how it was essential and how it worked. So what a better place to put money. Now, this is funny when people say, well, this doesn't work. Infinite banking doesn't work. So you're telling me the guy that had life insurance since like 1954 doesn't know how life insurance worked? And he had 49 life insurance policies? And you're telling me he doesn't know how that worked? Okay. Nelson had life insurance longer than 401ks and IRAs existed. I would say the guy knows what he's talking about. Probably seen it firsthand work for him. He also says in here, everyone thought he was crazy. It was the opposite of what the experts were saying. But an objective look at the facts of how life insurance worked, plus reason and logic, and continued sessions of intense prayer for guidance has proved that the system works. Nelson had basically 2 goals in life. 1 was to share his Christianity, and 2 was to teach the infinite banking concept. So in his book, you are going to see a lot of references and a lot of Bible verses. And that's just who he was. And he says, this requires understanding and discipline to implement the idea, but it can change your life dramatically, even beyond your fondest dreams. You have to take some time to understand it. You have to utilize it correctly. You have to have a coach, a teacher that's going to be there to help you through this process. That is exactly what I do with my clients. If you have a policy, I'm going to help you through that process. We're going to run strategies of when you need help with those things. I had a client just this week buying some property. Well, she could finance it with the owner. She could finance it with the bank. She was going to sell some property to buy other property. Well, why? Why sell $500,000 of property just to go pay down some new property? If you can make the payment without paying it down, keep the $500,000 of liquid money to expand, to use for whatever you need to use it for. Something she had not thought of, which is what I am here to help the clients with. So that's exciting that she has opportunity. Now we just have to think about it correctly. So many people think that this is just some like fluke that the infinite banking concept exists. It's not a fluke. It came out of necessity. Many people also say, well, I can't start right now. I don't have the money. Now we have really hard times. COVID came along and may have knocked out a business or whatever reason, we're just having a hard time financially. Nelson had $800,000 of debt at 23% interest. And he started. He figured out how he was going to get cash flow into that policy. Is it hard for you to start now? Yes. Do you need to figure out where your cash is going? Yes. We are going to talk about Parkinson's law coming up. And in that chapter, we're going to learn about why you might have to sacrifice a little bit today to get this started. But for now, that is a chapter we went over. How the infinite banking concept got started. I hope that was awesome for you all. I love it. I love to hear Nelson's stories. Many people want more of those stories. And, I do have, if you go on to my Without the Bank page, I have 3 interviews with Nelson on there that you are welcome to go watch. I think you have to purchase them in the store. That's a good question. They're on there somewhere. If you want them, let us know. We'll figure out where they're at and send you the link. But if you snoop around, and I think I know if you buy Life Without the Bank, you will get access to those interviews. But then you can hear it directly from him. Okay, if you have questions, you know where I'm at. MaryJo@withoutthebank.com. Email me if you want me to talk about something specific. I love it when you do. So email me, let me know, leave a review, share this with a friend, all the good things. You guys have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will talk to you next week.